What's going on, fam? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you've been well. On today's episode, we're going to be installing a URD short shifter for my 2022 Toyota Tacoma. Stay tuned. So this is going to be everything that's coming in the kit. You're going to have the short shifter extension, the set screws, the clamshell spacers, all the studs and hardware that you need, as well as the transmission spacer for the install. Here are the main tools you want to have for this installation. Maybe like a plastic pry tool to help you get the trim off, Allen key set, a little hook tool or something pointy to get the plastic tabs off, as well as 10, 12, 13, and 14 mil sockets. An extension helps, a ratchet or an impact, whichever one you want, a staking punch, and then a hammer. First step for this part is to open the glove box, and then there's going to be this front part that you're going to pry up on, and it'll allow us to take off this trim piece. Once you got this pried up, this is pretty much going to be loose. The next step is to take off the shift knob, and we'll go from there. So once you get the shift knob off, this will be free. There's actually going to be a retaining rubber piece that's under here that holds the e-brake boot on. So you just kind of need to work it a little bit and then it'll come right off. So now that we got majority of the trim piece out of the way, what we're gonna do is loosen these two 10 mil or Phillips head bolts here and here, and then the plastic tabs on either side. And just a side note, just a little trick for these plastic retaining clips. The trick is to push them down with something small until you hear a click, and then you'll be able to pull them out after that. Now that we have the rubber boot removed, what we're going to do is peel back this rubber, the smaller rubber boot, and you'll see the retaining clip right there. What we're going to do is push down with both sides and rotate it counterclockwise. Now that the clip is unlocked, you can see that we can pull it up freely like that. This whole shifter assembly will come right out. The next step, I removed the two 12mm bolts that were in the near side to us. What I'm actually going to do is use my multi-tool and just to kind of cut this way and this way, just so I can have a little more clearance towards those front bolts, and I'll be able to slip an extension in there. Now that I got the front part cut a little bit, I'll be able to undo these two bolts in the front, and I'm going to hit this fresh metal with some paint. Once you get the bolts off, don't forget to undo the breather, and then we can take the shift tower off. Now that we have the shift tower off, this is what it's going to look like. Just make sure you remember which way this gasket is going on, because we're going to have to reinstall that the proper way before we put the spacer back on. So now we're going to be installing the two studs on the two front holes with the longer side of the threads towards the transmission. Now that we have the two studs installed, we're going to install the gasket that came off earlier, and then we're going to put the spacer in. For this next part, we're going to be putting some black RTV gasket maker along the edge of the shift tower. So this side used to have the gasket, but because there's a spacer now, we need something to just seal this edge here. So we're going to put a nice thin bead around here and then flatten it out before we put it back on the transmission. Now that we got the RTV on the shift tower and everything's set back in place, what we're going to do is put the rear bolts in and tighten the two nuts in the front. Now we're going to start working with the shifter. The first step is we have to take off the little plastic piece here. What I'm going to do is actually put this little towel over it and put my thumb on each side and pop it off. I figured that's usually the easiest way to do it. For the next step, we're going to be putting the two clamshell pieces right there, and then from there we're going to put the shifter spacer on. And you just got to make sure these holes line up with the flat side of these clamshell spacers. Now that everything's tightened and secured on here, I used some red Loctite over here, and then we're gonna use a punch to stake the screws as well so they don't slip out. So now that everything's staked and secured, you can see that, we're gonna put the plastic piece back on the end. The easiest way I find to do this is to lay it flat on something and then just to take the shifter and push it into it. Now we're ready to reinstall the shifter assembly. So when you install it, make sure that the bend is facing forward, and then you just need to kind of wiggle it into place, and it'll drop right in. So once it drops in, we are gonna tighten this locking ring, so it's gonna go down and then we'll rotate it to the right clockwise. Now that the shifter is installed, we're gonna make sure that it goes through all the gears correctly and see how it feels. Cool, everything's working fine, so I'm gonna put the shift boot back on and start putting the trim pieces together. Definitely feels a lot better. Putting into reverse is a little more challenging, but I think it'll get easier as you break it in. That's going to be it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed the install video and I hope it was useful. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments below, and I'll leave links to the instructions that I followed as well as the URD website to get your short shifter kit as well. Until next time, stay tuned for the next episode. Like, subscribe, do all the things. Shoots.